What's up, legends? Today, Helldivers 2 just dropped a warbond announcement as well as a new balance patch which buffs several different weapons and stratagems and even an enemy AI buff as well. We also have a couple of hidden changes that were not mentioned in this patch. We'll get to that towards the end of this video. Now, we're not going to be covering the warbond in today's video as we don't quite have our hands on it yet, but we'll get to it right away this Thursday on March 20th, so stay tuned for that. So let's not waste our precious time and let's get right into it. So for the first change, we're going to be looking at the SMG-32 Reprimand change, which decreases the weapon spread from 50 to 40. So you may be wondering, what the hell does that even mean? To be clear, spread is not the same as accuracy, nor is it the same as recoil. Spread is essentially how far off the shot can go from where your crosshair really is. So those situations where you're sure you have your crosshair on top of the enemy's head, but somehow the shot still misses, is essentially due to the weapon spread. But for the sake of simplicity, essentially with this change, you'll be hitting more shots with the Reprimand than before, but the weapon will feel pretty much the same. I'm not gonna sit here and act like suddenly the Reprimand hits every shot, but you will for sure be more consistently landing your shots, especially at targets far away from you, which is where the spread will usually harm a weapon the most. It does feel pretty good, but again, I've always kind of enjoyed the Reprimand anyways. But yeah, moving on to the Slugger, we've also got a spread decrease from 20 to 6. Essentially, this means the Slugger is now nearly perfectly accurate, which means if you miss your shots, then, well, buddy, skill issue. Now, I'm just playing, but yeah, we've also gotten a damage increase from 250 to 280 damage. As far as that goes, I've skimmed over the enemy's database and their health pools, and it doesn't really seem like we'll be suddenly taking one shot to kill a certain enemy type, which previously would take about 2 or anything along those lines. It just overall seems like a slight damage increase without any sort of major shift in time to kill. We can probably assume though that with the damage increase, its durable damage will increase alongside it, meaning we might see some faster killing against more durable enemies. But we don't really have this information, so we're not going to be going deeply into this. As far as in-game goes, it feels pretty much the same. I don't know if it's placebo or not though, but the weapon does really feel more accurate, and it's super fun to snipe out Devastators with it. Moving over to the Liberator Concussive, I think this is quite an interesting buff. The Liberator Concussive has had its fire rate increased by a full 25%. Now, the reason I find this buff so interesting is because of the new Predator strain bugs. The new Predator bugs are best dealt with weapons that have tons of stagger and knockback, and the Liberator Concussive is literally built for this job specifically. With the 25% fire rate increase, we're looking at the Liberator Concussive starting to feel truly viable. Well, at least against one enemy strain type anyways. Now, I would absolutely love to test this out against the Predators to give my opinion on that, but the Predators are gone right now. But yeah, as far as other units go, I still wouldn't really pick it over weapons that can just kill enemies instead of CCing them. But I do see this playing a viable role against the Predator strain. We'll be running more tests when that comes out. As for the Diligence, we're looking at a nice 25% ammo count boost per magazine. I'd assume this weapon fell behind when comparing it with the Diligence counter sniper, so they're trying to give it a little bit of a boost. Not much to say here, just an ammo count increase. I will say though, after using it for a bit, it does kind of make me want to give the Diligence a proper go very soon. Now let's go ahead and take a look at 3 SMGs all at the same time, as they all got the same exact buff. All 3 of these SMGs, the MP98 Knight, the SDA-11 SMG, and the SMG-37 Defender, all got a 5 damage increase. The reason for this buff is the SMGs have been falling behind, despite being a great choice to pick, as they're one-handed weapons and can be paired with shields. Now with this change, it should increase their overall killing potential and just make them a tiny bit deadlier than they previously were. Emphasis on tiny, as this damage buff is as small as a 7% damage buff for the Knight and the SDA-11, and is only a 6% damage increase for the Defender. In game, it's really not noticeable. Again, it's just one of those small percentage tweaks that will make these weapons slightly better, but yeah, it's nothing major. I'm sure the devs will keep an eye out and see if these SMGs start getting picked up again. I'm sure it'll be worth giving a try if you're a fan of the one-handed choices. Now, as for the Pummeler SMG, we're also looking at only a 5 damage increase, but we've also got a stun value increase of 25%. Now, it's really hard to quantify how many shots less it'll take to stun an enemy, as some enemies require more shots to stun than others. It's yet another weapon that I feel got buffed in a really interesting way considering the Predator strain, as stunning them can be quite effective. Sadly, they're gone right now, again, so I can't quite test it, but stunning berserkers also feel really good. And I'll say, overall, the Pummeler change is the strongest out of all of the SMG changes for sure. It actually feels like it has a niche to it, you know, with the whole stunning, which is actually a great thing in Helldivers too. If I had to pick any of these SMGs, Pummeler would definitely be at the top of my list. Now moving over to the 4 assault rifles all at the same time again. The Liberator, the STA-52 assault rifle, the Adjudicator, and the Tenderizer. They've all received a 10 damage increase except for the Adjudicator that got a 5 damage increase. Now for some this is a much bigger deal than others. For example, for the Liberator and the STA-52 AR, we're looking at a hefty 14% damage increase, whereas for example the Adjudicator we're looking at only a 5 damage increase. For the Tenderizer we've got roughly a 10% damage increase, by the way. All across the board, fantastic news, as the ARs have been a meme in Helldivers 2, and just consistently seeing them become more and more powerful is absolutely music to my ears, as I love assault rifles in video games. I will say this, the Tenderizer is starting to feel like a freaking truck, dude. 105 damage is crazy. This thing is melting so hard. I still don't think it's like crazy good, but I am absolutely loving this change, and I honestly can't wait to run some Tenderizer games. It's starting to feel like the AK-47 of Helldivers 2, where it just hits so hard and feels so nice getting some nice clean headshots with it. Lastly, for the weapons, we've got the Eruptor. It's hard for me to get a solid feeling of how much of an improvement we're looking at here, as I've never been a fan of the Eruptor. For solo play, it's just a bit too costly to bring such a slow firing weapon as a primary, and after testing this new Eruptor buff, my opinion has not shifted, not even one bit. I will say this though, it's nice that it can hit Hulks in the eyes, but still, I don't really have much of a positive opinion here for the Eruptor. So I'll leave this more for the Eruptor fans out there. Let me know in the comment section what you feel about these changes. Now let's move away from the weapons and let's check out a couple of stratagem buffs. There aren't that many here, but let's see what we've got. First, the 110mm rocket pods now have an extra use before having to rearm, which now we're looking at a base use of 3, but if you have the ship module upgrade, we're looking at 4 total uses. I was hoping this would be the difference between maybe now being able to kill a factory strider with these 4 uses, but it does not quite seem to be the case. It'll mostly mean you'll have a better chance at taking out Bile Titans, and you can now pretty effectively take out 2 Hulks, since it usually takes about 2 salvos to kill one anyways. I don't find this makes the 110mm any worth bringing, but it's great for players who are new to the game, especially the ones that are stepping into difficulties where they now have to handle heavies, or players that struggle with landing their stratagems, as this auto aim stratagem will do most of the heavy lifting for you. Now as for the mechs, I know a lot of people will like this one. We're now able to bring 3 different mechs into the game. That's pretty much all you're gonna get anyways, as the cooldown takes about 10 minutes. So that'll mean you'd need the mission to last for at least over 30 minutes to make use of all of these mechs, which most group dives takes roughly around that length. So mech users will actually be able to make use of these mechs throughout the entire duration of the match. I find this change to be quite good. Honestly, I think mechs still deserve a bit more love. I'm not a huge mech guy, but I know that there are tons and tons of players who love the mechs, so I feel like giving a bit more love down that route is always a good idea. As for gameplay, this will only impact lengthy missions, as I said, and I find it might work best on Seaf flag missions, as you could now actually have a mech for each flag if you take 10 minutes in between each. so it may actually be huge for solo play on that mission, for example. As for the Sterilizer, we've got huge ergonomics boost. Here's the comparison between the before and after. Not much to say here. It seems like they're playing it safe with buffing the support weapon to see how it plays out. But yeah, it's still not worth bringing the Sterilizer in my opinion, as the other sources of gas output are in my opinion far better. I do still think the Sterilizer still deserves a buff to maybe stand out from other sources of gas, like maybe having a stronger duration on the confused status or something along those lines to make this worth bringing. Now moving on to the Stalwart, it has received a damage buff, and I'll say I'm really happy about this one. It got a 10 damage increase, which is equal to a 14 damage increase to be exact, and I think this is absolutely huge, especially as I've recently learned its potential against the new Predator strain. This 14% damage increase is going to be absolutely massive. I can't wait to get my hands on it in a solo game against the Predators again. Now there's not much to say here, just an absolutely massive improvement, especially considering this thing fires at over 1000 RPM when you set it on high. Damage output is crazy now. As for the heavy machine gun, we've also got a buff. We've reached out to the developers to see what this patch notes means exactly, and the heavy machine gun will now do its full 4 armor penetration to every range of the angles, except for very extreme angles, which in short, what it means is it will ricochet a lot less, and it will buff the crap out of it against, for example, behemoth chargers, as their face has kind of like that sharp look, and it will help a ton with dealing with hulks that aren't directly looking at you. In my opinion, those are the most notable situations where the HMG ricochet would happen the most for me. But yeah, either way, a great way to buff the HMG without actually touching up on its damage. In practice, you definitely feel the difference. For me, especially against the Behemoth Charger, as I said earlier. Against most other enemies though, I never really had much of a ricochet problem, as I generally play solo and the units are always kind of facing me anyways. Next up, let's take a look at the new enemies AI. The Automaton's situational awareness has improved, and they're now less distracted by each other, increasing their reaction speed in large groups. I'll say this, as far as in-game goes, I really have not noticed any changes. I'm guessing it's one of those very subtle AI changes where they're just more responsive and it's just an overall AI improvement. Honestly, it's a very welcome change, but I'll say I didn't really feel any difference throughout my recordings. I will say this though, this is one of those changes that will definitely require a large sample size. Spending a few hours recording here isn't really going to give me the full picture. So we'll see if these changes actually made gameplay harder like the developer said it would. As for the next AI change, here's what we've got. We've increased the number of AI calculations the game can perform. This primarily impacts scenarios with a high number of spawned enemies, improving the response times in those situations. However, this comes with a slight trade-off in game performance. First, let's talk about the performance. I'm happy to say I did not notice any change, but I'm not going to speak much on this as I do have a very high-end computer. I will say though, I do record with the FPS counter on, and I did not notice any FPS changes in older footages, so yeah. As far as the AI response goes, I don't know if this is placebo. If I pay close attention to bug breaches, the bugs come out of the breaches and immediately go to attack me, whereas previously they kind of came out of the bug breach and sat there for a solid second or two before a certain action was queued up. Again, it might be placebo, but I'm trying to pay close attention to AI changes, and that's as far as I've noticed anything. But realistically, neither one of the factions feel necessarily harder. It just seems like a more or less behind the scenes kind of change to smoothen out gameplay. Next up, there have been some dropship buffs. Both the Automaton and the Illuminate dropships received strong buffs to withstand more fire, and now can only really be effectively destroyed by either multiple players using the recoilless rifle or something along those lines, or by solo players utilizing the anti-tank emplacement or the spear, which still one-shots Automaton dropships, but not the Illuminate version, which, speaking of which, the Illuminate buff is, in my opinion, dramatically stronger than that of the Automatons. It also doesn't help that this update introduced an issue with the anti-tank emplacement, making it weirdly snap back down to the ground in between each shot, dramatically decreasing its anti-air potential. So you kind of have to really slow down your shots now, or else what you're seeing in the background happens. It just shoots once, then snaps back down, and then you have to wait for it to go all the way back up again. But anyways, I did bring this up with the devs, and I'll hope to see a fix for this soon enough. Lastly, the Barrager Tank turret also received a change. It now has a weak spot in its turret with only 750 health and an armor value of 3. I faced a couple of these tanks and I didn't quite notice a weak spot. I don't know if I'm going crazy or what it is, but yeah, what I can say is this health of 750 HP and an armor value of 3 is the same as all of the other tanks' heat sink. So whatever works against those tanks and those turrets will work on these all the same. Essentially, it seems like these tanks got a pretty massive nerf. And that's pretty much it for what was written in the patch notes. Now, let's get to the hidden changes, which I did come across 3 that were not on the patch notes. First, the smallest of the 3, they've reorganized how stratagems look in the stratagem selection menu. They're now separated by orbitals, barrages, eagles, support weapons, backpack, you know, etc. Just a nice little quality of life change, but yeah, let's go ahead and get to the meaty changes. Urban combat has been introduced for automatons, and with it comes these awesome automaton colonies. You get these different types of encampments with these large buildings that seem to be fabricators that are a bit tougher to destroy than regular fabricators. Overall, I'm super happy to get urban combat against automatons, and I cannot wait to get more playtime with it. So yeah, that was not introduced in the patch notes. Lastly, the biggest change of all and the most mind-blowing part of today's update, the Automaton Convoy. These convoys have literally 5 factory striders for us to kill, dude. And this is by far the hardest side objective we've gotten in the entire game. I mean, these things spawn 3 Devastators each, which means you'll be getting massive swarms of Devastators on top of dropships that come from engaging with these if their reinforcement is off cooldown. On top of that, you got 4 turrets for you to deal with and 10 freaking miniguns. This is so hard. To solo this is going to be an absolutely pain in the ass, and I can already see that I'm going to be getting very frustrated with this. And by the way, this factory strider right here in the middle of the convoy carries a stratagem jammer on top of it. Or I guess I should say it's not really a jammer. It's just like one of those on the Illuminate side that kind of messes up your stratagem codes. It's not really that big of a deal. It is, however, kind of annoying sometimes. These things will take a lot of coordination with your teammates and definitely tons of anti-tank emplacements and anti-tank weapons. As for solo play, I still have no clue how I'm gonna tackle these. I tried setting up anti-tank emplacement traps, but yeah, that didn't really go too well. I will fully experiment and test out a ton of strategies to handle these convoys, and I will get back to you guys. Now, with that being said, that concludes today's video. I appreciate all of you legends being here. Now it's time to get some gameplays against these damn convoys. I'll be catching you legends on the next one. Peace.